Welcome to the Business of Widows, real stories of grief, grace, and God's goodness. I'm your host, Abigail Peterson, and this is a special space for those who are walking through the unimaginable. Here we share honest, unfiltered conversations with widows and widowers who have lived through deep loss, yet have encountered God's presence in the middle of their pain. Each episode reminds you that your grief is real, your story matters, and you are not alone. So take a deep breath, come as you are, and join us as we explore heartbreak, healing, holy moments, and the unexpected goodness of God, one story at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Widows podcast, another episode. And this particular episode, I am so honored. I know I say that every single episode, but it is truly my honor to have a very long-standing friend of over 30 years, one of the very first widows that I think I'd ever really met in my life. Even my grandparents, either grandma was not a widow before you were. And so I'm so honored to have my very good friend, Sister Donna Padilla, with me today. As I said, I met her when I was 12 years old, and she was single at the time, but I think you were close to being newly engaged. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So hello, welcome, Sister Donna.
Good to be here.
So I would love for you, let's just start there. Let's just start at the beginning. You can share about the time how old you were when you came to church and how you brought your first husband.
Okay. I was 25 years old when I came to church, and I came all by myself, and I was dating someone at the time, and that didn't last. So I was in church, and I was working with someone who was the first friend I made when I moved to Phoenix, and his name was Cliff, and we worked together. We went to the gym together. We hiked mountains together. We hung out. He wanted to play basketball. I would rebound the basketball for him when we were playing. And so that's how we met. So I came to church and got saved, and he did not.
Oh.
And he was engaged to somebody, and I had recently broke up with somebody when I came to church. So I witnessed to him and gave him preaching cassette tapes way back then.
Back in the day when we had tapes.
Back in the day, does everybody remember what cassette tapes were? But he listened to the cassette tapes a few times, and then he actually wound up coming to church. He got baptized the first night he came.
Wow.
And he got the Holy Ghost 4 days later and stayed in church the whole time. And his fiance didn't want anything to do with the church. And so we started dating actually 9 months after he was in church. And
how old were you at this time?
I would have been 27.
Okay.
When we started dating. And
Brother Cliff was?
And he would have been 29.
Okay.
And so we dated for a very short amount of time. And we got married just a few months later. We started dating in June. We got married in September.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so
it was a beautiful wedding. And again, we go back a long way. I believe I was probably 13, maybe 14 at your wedding. Probably.
That sounds right.
I think I was probably about 13 years old when I was at your wedding. And, weddings are exciting for young girls. So I remember, just being there and the excitement and, what 13-year-old girl is going to catch a bouquet and think she's getting married. But, it was funny at the time. And I did not live here. My sister actually was your best friend. And I kind of commandeered you as a friend by way of her. And so while I was at the wedding, I didn't live here. So I went back home to Las Vegas after the wedding. And so shortly after your wedding in September, Brother Cliff got ill. Tell us what happened.
So we got married September 25th of 93. And at Thanksgiving, So in November, we went to go visit his sister in California, right outside of LA. And Cliff, right before that, the week before we left, we were at work. We worked together, and we were at work, and I looked up at him and I said, "You're yellow." And his eyes were this peculiar, deep, dark yellow, the whites of his eyes. And he thought I was pranking him, and I told him, "Go down and go look in the mirror in the bathroom." And he came back and, kind of horrified. We went to the doctor's office to see what was wrong with him. So, kind of comical, but the doctor gave me a shot and gave him a shot. They thought he had hepatitis and told us to stay away from each other, which we thought was the end of the world because we just got married.
Yeah.
And then he said, "You guys just need to relax and take some time off." So we went to see his sister outside of LA. We went to bed that night, got up in the morning, and his sister said, "He just needs to relax. I'm going to teach you some techniques how to give him a massage on his neck and his back so that he can just unwind. He's just really worked up." So she showed me how to do those techniques. And when I did that, I had my hands all over his neck. The following day when he woke up, I went to go do the technique again, and he had a golf ball size mass that had formed underneath his skin, and it was just horrifying. So when we got back to Phoenix, we went to see a doctor, and the doctor was, alarmed and scheduled us the following day for a biopsy. So when we returned home, it was a Tuesday. The doctor scheduled it for a Wednesday. We went to the hospital and we had to be rescheduled for Thursday because of a weird set of circumstances. And they wheeled him into surgery, and the doctor came out and he said, "I have some terrible news. Your husband has cancer. It's metastatic, and he probably has less than 3 months to live."
And you'd been married for 3 months.
And we had been yes. So we had no idea. Nobody had even said anything about cancer,
Mhm.
so we were a little bit, just puzzled, I guess, is an understatement. But Abby's sister was a really good friend of mine, and we had actually had some blood work done and some scans done, and he had tumor masses all over. And the doctor had told me we were going to redo these tests because something's wrong with the test. Because this shouldn't be. He doesn't have all these masses.
Mhm.
And she was in the medical field, and I remember her face like she could not believe this was horrible news or whatever. So we just weren't real medically savvy, and didn't really understand how serious the situation was,
Right.
pretty much. So, and then we got the news that that coincidentally, when we had the biopsy and everything, that was the Thursday of our church's annual anniversary meeting.
Mhm.
So we had a lot of preachers there praying for him and praying for the situation, and, felt like we were in good hands if we.
Right. And so this would have been in December. So
Mhm.
initial symptoms were November, and 2 or 3 weeks later he's officially diagnosed with
Yes.
metastatic cancer at 29 years old.
Mhm.
Been married now for 5 months.
Mhm.
And I remember, even at 13, 14 years old, I remember seeing you at the altar and praying, and just the anguish on your face of during that time, you know, of just being a newly married young lady, new to the church. You'd only been in a couple years,
Yeah, pretty new
and
convert.
and how trying to trust God, and believing for a healing. And I'll never forget, it was probably 2 months later, so it would have been in February. And I remember there was one particular incident where he almost died.
Yes. So that was February 8th. Actually, I'm not good with dates. That date screams in my head. But
Mhm.
February 8th, he was throwing up blood and having a terrible, terrible time.
Mhm.
And we couldn't get the bleeding to stop. And we called the doctors and what can we do? What can we do? And right before that, the doctors had told us, we're very sorry. There's nothing we can do for you.
Mhm.
Basically go home and die.
Right.
And they said it much more diplomatically than that, but that was the gist of it. And so we wound up going to an alternative therapy clinic in Mexico, the Gerson Therapy Clinic, and learned some things that were helpful. We were kind of grasping at straws at that point, but we learned some things that were helpful that made the road a lot smoother for us with nutrition and made his pain
More tolerable.
more tolerable. And so February 8th was after we had gotten back from the Gerson clinic, and and he shouldn't have lived. I mean, it was there we were at like probably the 3-month mark where he should have probably died. And without a doubt, there was a whole bunch of saints in my house
Mhm.
and everybody praying, and it was like the peace of God swept through there, and we felt it. Everybody felt it. And it
Mhm.
was just total peace because it was pandemonium, and then all of a sudden it was just a calm that only God could do.
Yes.
And I'm positive that God gave me that extra time because I don't think I would have been able to handle, or I would have not handled as well for sure.
Him
Him
passing away
passing then for
so
sure. It was
soon.
just so soon, and it was just, it was just definitely the hand of God.
Yeah, so soon because that was I mean, just at that point, you guys had only been married less than 6 months.
Hmm.
And then I remember a couple months later, so it was probably in May, he turned 30. And I
Yes,
remember you guys having a party for him, a surprise party for him.
we did. So the funny thing is the week before that, I had to tell him, you can't drive anymore. You just, you can't be driving anymore. And the morning of his surprise party was the last time he drove a car.
Mm.
And so he drove to take one of the young boys in church to go get a pair of tennis shoes because that little boy had never had a pair of brand name tennis shoes. So he wanted to
Oh.
take him out and get him a pair of Nikes.
Uh-huh.
And when he came back, everything was set up and his birthday party was going on.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, and then for his birthday, we went out and got him a moped because we were afraid
You didn't want him to drive
we didn't
anymore,
want him
so
to be driving a car anymore. And his doctor was so kind. The new doctor that we got was so kind and said, I said, he wants to get a moped. I know he's going to buy one. What am I going to do? And he said, this is going to be really awful to say, but he's only going to hurt himself. He doesn't need to be driving a car because he's going to hurt himself and somebody else. But if he gets a moped, he's just going to hurt himself.
Mm.
So yeah. So he drove his moped everywhere he wanted to go after that.
Now, something interesting about myself is that I am a date person, and I do remember dates. So, I remember that your anniversary, it was September 25th, but I also remember that Brother Cliff passed away on September 3rd.
Right.
So, I cannot even imagine not that you didn't even make it a year, but within the same month
Right.
of your anniversary. And I remember, I know this is your story, but I remember we were out of town. And again, we kind of already mentioned my sister and her being, you're one of your really good friends. We were out of town. It was actually Labor Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And we were out of town when we got the news that Brother Cliff had passed away. And I have heard this story before, so I could probably tell it, but I would like for you to tell just about, again, that same peace, the peace speaker that entered your house in February. That same peace speaker was there the whole time. He never left.
Absolutely.
But the night that Brother Cliff passed away on September 3rd at 30 years old, being married less than a year. I would like for you to share because I think there's some moments in your story that I just think I've thought of myself going through my own tragedy of how you handled it when your husband passed away.
So I was working. God answered a lot of prayers for me through all that because I was working Monday through Friday, and I asked God two things. I asked him that I would be with Cliff when he died, that he wouldn't die alone,
Mhm.
and that it would be there would be some sort of peace through it if he was in fact not going to heal him or not going to, give him a miracle.
Yes.
So the day he died was a Saturday. It was September the 3rd. It was Labor Day weekend, and things started bothering his skin. So I had run out in that morning, ran to the store to buy him some like a loose fitting pajama and pajama tops that was soft cotton. So I had gotten home from the store, and he he said, "Oh, these are perfect. They're not going to bother my skin." So he put them on, and he said, "Last night I thought I was going to die last night." And I said, "Yeah, I thought you were going to die last night too." So the week prior to that, he was in a hospital bed. We had moved everything to downstairs, and he was in a hospital bed, and I was sleeping in the bed right next to him. And his covers were kind of poofed up over the top of his chest. So one night I looked over there, and I'd sort of check on him, and I'd see the covers rise and fall with his breathing. Well, the covers were just propped up in such a way that they weren't moving with his breathing.
Mhm.
So I just laid there and cried because I just was sure he was dead.
Mhm.
And he rolled over or coughed or something, and I screamed, and he was like, "What is the matter with you? What is the matter?" And I was like, "I thought you were dead." And so then the night before he died, he had a very rough night and was having a really difficult time sitting up and even moving. And he said, "I felt like I was going to die last night." And I said, I thought maybe you were too." And he said, I'm ready. Are you?" And I said, "I'm probably as ready as I'll ever be, but I don't know that I'm really ready." And so it was probably within 2 hours after that conversation. I just sat next to him. We were holding hands and we were just talking. And he said he had to get up. He wanted to go into the bathroom. And he got up, went into the bathroom, and he sort of froze, like stiff. And I had a difficult time getting him back to the bed to lay him down. And when he laid down, his he lost his vision, and they had told us that the tumors, or they had metastasized in several areas. Well, they had moved to his brain, and they told me that he was going to lose his hearing and his sight much earlier than he did. He didn't lose it till the day he died,
Mhm.
but I was prepared for that. And we actually practiced holding his hand against my throat because I used to babysit a deaf child, and they feel the vibrations when you're talking to them. And so I practiced saying, "I love you," or making some common phrases so that he would know that if he lost his hearing, that
Mhm.
it was me, I was talking to him, or what have you. So he looked at me and said, "My vision's going, I can't see." And I said, "Can you see my hand in front of you at all?" He said, "I can't see anything." And he said, "Are you there?" He goes, "I can't hear you." And I picked his hand up and put it on my throat. And I just said, "I love you." And he said, "I love you too." And then there was like a little pause. And then he said, "I love you." And he almost sounded like a robot. It was like, "I love
Mhm.
you." And then I said, "Cliff, let's just pray." And so his last words were Jesus. He just said Jesus, and he put his hand up.
Mhm.
And I can't even describe the I I watched him leave his body. I didn't see anything physical. I
Mhm.
just knew it happened. And it was actually just a really special moment. And I just knew he wasn't there anymore. And and I just sat there and held his hand or whatever. And then it was just vacant. He just wasn't there. I called one of the brothers in the church that had helped him. So this is
Mhm.
before cell phones and all
Right.
that. And we had a pager. Brother Greg had a pager, and Cliff would page him when he needed him. Well, it was Saturday, so I called his house, and his wife answered, and I just said, I really need some help. And Brother Greg had come over, and he was dead and gone by the time Brother Greg got there. And Brother Greg just went upstairs to the upstairs part of my house and just started playing a guitar really softly. And I mean, by that time, other people were, coming. My pastor was out of town,
Mhm.
and I called his wife, and she said, I'm picking him up at the airport. And I said, can you come over right when you get him off the plane? Come direct to the house. So
Mhm.
when he came over to the house, I was just laying down in the bed next to Cliff, just holding his hand. I wasn't ready for them to come and get him and zip him in a body bag and all that. And when my pastor walked in, he said, oh, I'm sorry. Like he thought he interrupted
Yeah.
something. And I said, no, he died. He's gone. And so thankfully, my pastor and his wife sat with me, and they came, and I was so sure God was going to heal him. I stood
Mhm.
outside of my house and watched the van drive around the corner. I was just sure he was going to round the corner and bring him back,
Mhm.
and obviously that didn't happen. And then I was tasked with going, and he was the youngest child he had 5 siblings, or there was 5 of them. And I went down and saw his mom and had to deliver the news that he had died. And that was hard. That was difficult.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and that I don't usually remember September 3rd, like that doesn't hit me hard, but Labor Day is a
Significant.
significant time for
Mhm.
me.
And I remember the funeral because at that particular time for your guys' church, there had not been a lot of funerals. It was a younger church.
Right,
And so there hadn't been a funeral in years.
right,
And not somebody who was 30 years old either.
right.
And so I remember Brother Cliff's funeral, you know, lots of preachers were there, lots of people were there, his family. And again, a core memory for me is I just remember you being at the front of the church with his casket. And I just remember you praising,
Yeah,
lifting your hands and praising. And I mean, I was only, like I said, I think I was 14 at the time. And who knew that that would make an imprint, you know? And I have said, and I've shared with podcast audience that, one of the verses that I've clung to is Psalms 34 and 1. I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continually be in my mouth. And watching you that day, that is the epitome of that verse, is being able to raise your hands at your husband's funeral. Somebody that you planned to be married to for years, but you guys weren't even married a year. The plans of kids and the plans of, you know, what you were going to do together as a couple didn't even have a chance to start.
right.
It didn't even have a chance to start. And I I actually shortly after Brother Cliff passed away, I want to say probably maybe 2 months, maybe not even 2 months. It might have been, yeah, probably like 6 or 8 weeks. I had the privilege of staying with you.
Yeah,
So if it sounds like we're old giddy friends, yes we are. I was I was the project at the time. And so my parents allowed me to come and stay with you, and I stayed with you for probably, I don't know, it was probably 8 weeks maybe I stayed with you.
yeah.
And I
It was
rem
good times.
it was good times. And I remember, we had there were several times a week where we would walk to the church. You lived close to the church, and we would walk to the church and pray. And, you know, I did not recognize being 14 years old. I didn't recognize the pain that you were going through. I didn't recognize that you lost your husband and you were lonely. To me, it was like, this is my friend, Sister Donna, and she's buying the kind of cereal I like, and she's buying the Entenmann strudel that I like, And I, I just, looking back, I think about that and I think, man, I was a terrible friend, but I was a kid and I didn't know any better, and so,
I don't know if I don't know if you would have been older that you would have, it might have been a more mature perspective, but I don't know unless somebody's ever really been
mhm,
a widow
sure.
that they could really comprehend all the obvious things, but the nuances of it.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. It is. I mean, I hear it every time I get an opportunity
Yeah.
to speak with another widow. Unless you've been in that situation, it's hard. It's hard to kind of put on that feeling of understanding of what it's like.
And there's things that you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes and assume that you understand, but you don't.
Mhm,
And there's I know there's things I thought about people that were widowed. I mean, I had,
mhm,
I was young, so I didn't know very many widows, but
right.
the few that I did know, I was pretty sure I knew what I would do if I was in their shoes,
Sure.
but you really don't.
Right. Until it
And
actually happens,
until
and
it
then
actually happens, and I think everybody at different stages in life, I was like you said, what I lost was hopes and dreams, and it was a very difficult 9 months because his illness was very taxing
mhm.
and very draining. When I got married, I weighed 149 pounds the day of my wedding, and the day that Cliff died, the only reason I know what I weighed is my mom had come
Mhm.
to be with me, and she made me get on a scale, and I weighed 94 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
So, it was a significant weight loss that I honestly had no idea. I'm not a scale person even to
Yeah.
this day. I'm
Yeah.
just not getting on the scale.
Right.
If my clothes don't fit, I figure I better quit eating brownies after dinner, right? but, but I didn't necessarily realize
The
the
toll
toll that it
it's
took on
taking
me
on you.
physically.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't know until you're in those shoes. And I would never want anybody to understand. I remember feeling like you just don't understand. Feeling that frustration, but really for somebody to understand, they'd have to go through that, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Agreed. Agreed. Now, here we are,
Right.
32 years later.
Hmm.
So, update us on your life now.
Okay, so I was married to an incredible man. My first marriage was incredible. We did not have children, and 3 years later, I remarried. 3 years later, I started dating
Mhm.
and had also a very quick courtship, and I married somebody that had never been married, didn't have kids, and they are 7 years younger than I am.
Okay.
So, that was something I said I would never do, but
Never say
here I am.
never.
You never say never. Here I am. I've been married for 29 years now, and I have 3 children, and I have 4 grandchildren, and sure never thought my life would take this turn.
Yes.
So, after Cliff died, it was I didn't make great choices and great decisions, and I struggled with, you struggle with a lot of things. I didn't, grateful I didn't have a problem praising God. I wish I could attribute that to something maybe
Mhm.
other than preaching that, God's worthy of praise. God's worth your praise on a bad day.
Yes.
And, somebody's a statistic.
Unfortunately.
Somebody's taking the hit somewhere, and we just don't ever think it should be us,
Right.
maybe,
Right.
but here we are.
Mhm.
And I never struggled there, but I did struggle with a lot of other things. I struggled with, we didn't have a very large church. There is no lonely like being widowed. So when I was single, I wanted to be married and have a significant other and go through life with someone. You have that. That's
Mhm.
normal and natural.
Right.
But I never felt loneliness until like I did until after I was widowed, because you lose part of yourself, and it's all consuming when it first happens. It's, the I had a lot of people, well intentioned, try to tell me that, time's going to heal all wounds. And I disagree with that statement. Time right now has not healed this wound.
32 years later.
32 years later, there are things that I see that I still long for. For me, it was more of a friendship with Cliff. I had a longer friendship with him than I did a marriage,
Right.
but even I miss him terribly. It's a pang that's very deep and very real. Where it does get easier is, instead of 24 hours, I'm consumed with this, and that's all that's in my mind. And it's all consuming. And then, as time goes on, then it's only 22 hours of your day. Then it's 20 hours of your day. And I think for everybody, people mourn differently.
Mhm.
I actually like sort of plowed on with my life on the front end, and not a good plan. And so, had to kind of backtrack, and I sort of mourned later when everybody else was done mourning, and figured that's what I should be done mourning too. I really never stopped to, just grieve like I should.
Mhm.
So that was, you don't plan or not plan how you're going to do that. It's just something that you kind of robotically do. So I just had a lot of uncertainty in my mind. I never questioned God. I can't say that I questioned God, but things I did question was, I felt all alone
Mhm.
in the church. I felt like
The fifth wheel.
the fifth wheel, like your friends that are really, really, really good friends, they're kind to you, but when you're getting included, it almost feels like a pity mission.
Mhm.
And they're with couples, they're with each other, and it's just, magnified when you're with them. So I spent a lot of time with, and then I worked during the day. So it's like, when these people's husbands came home, their husbands weren't looking for them to go out and hang out with me, and
Right.
they were kind, and they were like, the husbands didn't mind if I was over there hanging out at their house. But I mean, that gets old too. I mean, they
Mhm.
didn't get married to have somebody always
Their wife's friend.
their wife's friend over all the time.
Yes.
So, and the people that are younger in the church, the unmarried people, the single people, it just, you're beyond that phase of your life, and so
Mhm.
that just doesn't work. And then you sort of, the older people, if there was somebody older and widowed,
Mhm.
they're knitting and rocking in the rocking chair, and you're 30.
So your struggle wasn't necessarily that you were bitter and you were questioning God. It was struggles more of being lonely and finding your place.
Yes, I worked in a law firm doing lien and bond foreclosure, so I was exposed to a lot of attorneys and professional men. And so there was never a time where I was gonna date somebody who didn't share my faith, but it was a constant reminder
Mhm.
of, I didn't have opportunity where, in the church, I didn't feel
Mhm.
like that. I didn't feel like I had opportunity to, go on maybe.
Mhm.
And not necessarily sure that I wanted to. It
Mhm.
was just, the loneliness is overwhelming.
Mhm. You were there within 24 hours after my husband passed away. You were one of the first people that came and was there for me and gave me a list of the things that you need to do when when your spouse passes away unexpectedly. Here's the things that you need to do. And again, one of those things that I'll be forever grateful for, because you don't know what you need in that particular situation, you
Right.
know? And since then, you and I have had many conversations, and I've asked you things. I've asked you things because I never thought to ask you some of these things before because I wasn't in the widow club, but now
Right.
I am. And one of the things that I wanted you to share today is, the joy and the hope and the life that God gave you after that devastation. God blessed you. He
Absolutely.
blessed you. And I have yet to, with the exception of my own dad, who was a widower and remarried shortly after, my mom passed away, I have not met very many people, specifically widows, who have remarried. And so I said, I've got to have you on because you are one of the women that I know that has went on to remarry and has continued to live life, you know? And so I would love for you to share how you've talked to your kids because your kids didn't obviously know your first husband. They came along afterwards.
So, kind of a funny story. My husband went on a business trip when my children would have been 6, 8, and 9.
Hmm.
And as a special treat, because daddy was gone, I was driving them out to a town called Fountain Hills for this special ice cream. It's this ice cream fountain store. I mean,
Hmm.
just a really cool little place for kids. So we're going to drive out there. Well, on the way there, we pass the cemetery where Cliff is buried.
Hmm.
And my son said, Mom, that looks like a really cool park. I've never seen that. Could we stop there? And I said, Well, that's not a park. That's a cemetery. And that's where people get buried when they die. And he said, Do you know anybody in there?
Wow.
So at this point, my children knew that I was married before.
Hmm.
And I said, Yeah, well, Brother Cliff's married there. Oh, the guy that you were married to? And I said, Yeah. And they said, Could we stop and see him? And so it was kind of a awkward moment for me because I went to the gravesite the day of the funeral. I went to the gravesite out of necessity because they had put his headstone there and there was an error with it and I had to go there and meet them.
Mm.
And so I went to the gravesite then
Hmm.
and then we had a funeral in our church and the gentleman that died was buried in that same cemetery. So I was there that day.
Hmm.
Other than that, I had never been to the cemetery.
Mm.
So I grew up Catholic and they're kind of pray to the dead and all that. So just thought maybe it'd be good for me to just avoid that, right? So at any rate, we're headed out there. We go and get our ice cream. On the way coming back, we stop. I can't even remember where Cliff is buried. I'm wandering around this massive graveyard and then remember that he was by this huge willow tree. So maybe I'll try over there. And
Hmm.
sure enough, I find him. And we're standing looking down at the headstone and the kids are reading it and my cell phone rings and it's my husband. And my kids go, "Oh, it's daddy," because I have this special ring. And
Uh-huh.
my youngest daughter picks up the phone and says, "Oh, hi, Dad. Oh, we're having a great time. We're visiting Brother Cliff right now." And so imagine trying to explain to your husband why you are taking your 3 small children to visit
First
your first
husband.
husband's gravesite, and so we have a good I'm married to a wonderful man that, thought it was hysterical, but he was kind of wondering why I took them there.
Hmm.
So then on the way home, we had a conversation. And in the meantime, my children had seen pictures of Cliff and I together, like in other people's collages on their
Hmm.
wall at church, what have you. And so my first husband was half Filipino, so he was darker skinned. And so one of my kids said, Wow, if we would have been your kids in your first marriage, we would have been brown. So, it's one of those funny things.
Well, I am so grateful that you got to share a little bit of your story. Again, I I mean, I've known you for 30 plus years and have been a part of this story and as a as kind of like a bystander, an observer. And so I just what a strength you've been to me currently, but even looking back, even as an adult widow looking back now, and I can see how God showed up, from the very beginning in God's mercy and grace. And that day in February when he should have died, but you weren't ready and God spared him and
Absolutely.
gave you that extra time. And then, I think of again his birthday party and how what a great day that was for you guys. And I
Yes.
remember seeing pictures and him smiling and then to lose him y- at such a young age and but then to know that just 3 years later that you did remarry, that there is God still does have a plan for our life, and there are hopes and there are dreams that can still be fulfilled in spite of a loss, in spite of something that happens that we have no control over.
Absolutely.
And so what would be something as a final word to those that are listening, what would be something that you would leave with our listeners today about how God carried you through that grief? A Bible verse? What was something that has kept you all these years?
It's simple for me. It's just that God's good, and we don't see, even in tragedy, God doesn't intervene in every situation of our lives. And if he interfered and made everything just smooth, where would be our faith to serve him?
Hmm.
And he's faithful. And regardless of how tragic or how horrible a situation is, he's available. He's there to talk to. He's there to comfort. He's there to bring peace. I know that he hears my prayers. I hear things come over the pulpit, the voice of God through the man of God
Hmm.
that just sends direction, correction, comfort, whatever it is that you need. And I was a relatively new convert when that happened to me. And it probably is the event that cemented my determination to live for God no matter what,
Hmm.
because I've met people, you seem to attract people that have your same circumstance, or maybe you're just paying attention more
Hmm.
or paying, to that situation. But I've met several widows, young ones, in fact, and many who are not believers
Hmm.
and many who are not saved, and they don't have the peace that I have, and they didn't have the help that I had,
Hmm.
and they don't have the God that I have.
Right.
So I'm grateful. I'm also a believer. I don't think people should be alone.
Hmm.
One of my very dear friends, just my dear friend died, and her husband has been widower now for 2 years,
Hmm.
and he's looking to remarry, and a lot of people are weighing in on that. And he was concerned that I would have a problem with that since his wife and I were so close.
Hmm.
And I will be so happy for him because his wife is not going to replace my friend.
Right.
And I love my husband now, but he didn't replace my first husband. He filled an office,
Hmm.
and it's been a wonderful life. And he's a fantastic husband and a wonderful dad to my
Hmm.
children and an amazing grandfather.
Hmm.
But you don't replace people.
Hmm.
But I have somebody to walk through life with that, with all the bells and whistles and the ups and downs and, to walk with me. And so, but my takeaway from all this, Sister Abby, is that God is faithful and that he provides and he does care. So
He does. He does. And we'll end our our podcast today on that note. He is faithful. God is faithful, and He does provide. Thank you, Sister Donna, for being on this episode and sharing your heart and sharing your thoughts. And I'm just, again, so grateful that you're in my life. And for those that are listening, tune in to the next episode of the Business of Widows podcast. Thank you for listening to the Business of Widows. If today's conversation brought you comfort, clarity, or hope, I invite you to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with another widow or widower who might need it. Remember, you are loved, you are seen, and you don't have to walk this road alone. Join me next time as we continue sharing real stories of grief, grace, and God's goodness, because healing is holy and hope is still alive.